December 2002, Trent Reznor sat alone in his Los Angeles apartment watching MTV. It was 2 a.m., he couldn't sleep. He'd been struggling with depression and addiction for years. His relationship had just ended. 9-inch Nails felt like a lifetime ago, even though it had only been a few years. And then suddenly, on the screen, appeared something that would destroy him in the most beautiful way possible. A music video, black and white, an old man with a weathered face sitting at a piano. And then Trent heard it, his own words, his own melody, but coming from someone else's mouth. I hurt myself today to see if I still feel. It was Johnny Cash, covering Hurt, the song Trent had written in 1994 during the darkest period of his life. A song about self-destruction, about addiction, about trying to feel anything through the numbness. And now here was Johnny Cash, 70 years old, dying, singing those same words, but they meant something completely different. When Trent wrote Hurt, he was 29 years old, angry, self-destructive. The song was about the rush of pain, the addiction to feeling anything, even if that something was agony. But when Johnny sang it at 70, dying from diabetes, having just lost June Carter Cash 4 months earlier, the song became about regret, about mortality, about looking back at a life of mistakes and knowing you're running out of time to fix them. Trent watched the entire video in silence, tears streaming down his face. And when it ended, he sat in the darkness of his apartment and realized something profound. That song wasn't his anymore. Johnny Cash had taken it and made it about something bigger, something more universal, something Trent himself couldn't have written at 29 because he hadn't lived it yet. To understand how this moment happened, you have to go back to 2002. Johnny Cash was 70 years old and dying. June Carter Cash, his wife of 35 years, his savior, the woman who'd pulled him out of addiction and kept him sober and alive, had died on May 15, 2003, after complications from heart surgery. Johnny was destroyed. He'd always said, "When June goes, I go," and everyone knew he meant it. For 4 months after June's death, Johnny barely functioned. He was in constant physical pain from diabetes, autonomic neuropathy. He could barely walk. His eyesight was failing. But none of that compared to the emotional pain of losing June. Rick Rubin, who'd been producing Johnny's American recording series since 1993, knew Johnny needed music, needed something to focus on, something to pour his grief into. Rick had been collecting songs for Johnny to cover. He'd brought dozens of suggestions over the years, everything from Depoa Mod to Soundgarden. Johnny trusted Rick's taste even when the songs seemed strange for a country legend. And one day, Rick brought Hurt by 9-inch Nails. Johnny listened to it, Trent's version, the industrial, aggressive, angry version from 1994, and Johnny's first reaction was no. He told Rick, "This is a young man's song. This is about drugs and self-harm. That's not me anymore. I've been clean for 30 years. Rick said, "Listen to it again, John. Don't listen to the production. Listen to the words. They're about regret, about the weight of your past, about becoming someone you don't recognize. That's you right now." Johnny listened again, and this time he heard it differently. "I focus on the pain, the only thing that's real." That line hit him because physical pain was the only thing Johnny could feel anymore. Everything else was numb after losing June. The needle tears a hole, the old familiar sting. Johnny had spent 10 years of his life addicted to pills, sticking needles in his arm. He knew that sting. "Try to kill it all away, but I remember everything." Johnny had tried to forget his mistakes, his failed first marriage, the children he'd abandoned, the people he'd hurt. But he remembered everything, especially now as he faced death. "What have I become, my sweetest friend?" Johnny thought of June, his sweetest friend, and what had he become without her? Dying old man, drowning in grief. "Everyone I know goes away in the end." Jack, his brother, his parents, Elvis, now June, everyone had gone away. Johnny was the last one standing, and he didn't want to be. "You could have it all, my empire of dirt." Johnny had fame, money, legacy, but what did it matter? It was just dirt, just meaningless without June. "I will let you down. I will make you hurt." Johnny had let people down his whole life. Vivian, his first wife, his children,
and now he was making everyone hurt by dying slowly in front of them. Rick was right. This song was about Johnny, not the 29-year-old Trent who wrote it, but the 70-year-old Johnny who was living it. So Johnny agreed to record it. They went into the studio, just Johnny and his guitar. No band, no production, just an old man and 6 strings. Johnny sang it in one take. His voice was weak, fragile. You can hear it breaking in places. Hear the pain, the exhaustion, the surrender. When he sang "What Have I Become?", his voice cracked, and you knew he was thinking of June. When he sang "Everyone I Know Goes Away in the End," he was listing the dead in his mind. The song took on a weight that Trent's version, as powerful as it was, couldn't have, because Johnny was actually dying, actually facing the end. This wasn't metaphorical pain, this was real pain. Rick Rubin listened to the playback and knew they had something devastating. He called Mark Romanek, a music video director who'd worked with everyone from Madonna to Michael Jackson, and said, "I need you to film Johnny Cash. I don't know how much longer he has. We need to document this." Mark came to Nashville, to the Johnny Cash Museum, which had recently closed down. The museum was in ruins, exhibits gathering dust, gold records on walls that nobody looked at anymore, artifacts from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Mark set up cameras and filmed Johnny in this decaying museum of his own life. Johnny sitting at a piano, looking at his own memorabilia like he was visiting a grave. June's costumes behind glass, photos of people who were all dead now. The video intercuts between young Johnny, powerful and vital, and old Johnny, broken and fading. There's a shot where Johnny's hands are shaking as he tries to pour tea, the disease destroying his nervous system. There's a shot of June's dress, and you see Johnny look at it, and his face just crumbles. Mark Romanek said later, "I wasn't directing Johnny. I was just documenting his grief. He was performing for the camera, but he was also just sitting there dying and letting us watch." The most powerful moment in the video comes at the end. Johnny at the piano, surrounded by the debris of his life. And in the final shot, June appears behind him, her spirit, her memory. And Johnny closes the piano lid, and it's like he's closing the book on his life. The video was finished in early December 2002. It was released shortly after, and that's when Trent Reznor saw it. Trent had known Johnny was covering the song. Rick Rubin had asked permission months earlier. Trent had said yes because he respected Johnny, but he hadn't heard it yet, hadn't seen the video. So when it came on MTV that night at 2 a.m., Trent was unprepared for what he was about to experience. He watched this 70-year-old man sing words Trent had written at 29, and those words meant something completely different. Trent had written hurt about wanting to feel something, anything, even pain, because numbness was worse. He'd written it during active addiction, during self-destruction, during the kind of nihilistic despair that comes from being young and lost and angry at everything. But Johnny sang it about the opposite, about feeling too much, about being unable to escape the weight of memory and regret, about the pain of surviving everyone you love, about the hurt of still being alive when you want to follow your wife into death. When the video ended, Trent sat in silence for a long time. Then he called a friend, someone in the industry, and he was crying. "I just saw Johnny Cash's version of Hurt," Trent said, "and that song isn't mine anymore." The friend didn't understand. "What do you mean?" Trent said. "I mean, I wrote that song, but Johnny lived it. He took my song about being 29 and self-destructive and made it about being 70 and facing death. And his version is what the song was always supposed to be. I just didn't know it yet because I hadn't lived enough to understand." Trent gave an interview a few months later, March 2003, and the interviewer asked about Johnny's cover. Trent's response became famous. "I popped the video in, and wow, tears welling, silence, goosebumps. I just lost my girlfriend because that song isn't mine anymore." That quote, "that song isn't mine anymore," became the defining statement about the cover, about what happens when an artist takes your work and transforms it into something you couldn't have imagined. Trent said in that same interview, "I'd been driving around listening to the radio and heard it, but watching the video, it was overwhelming. Seeing Johnny Cash sing my song, it was like being in the presence of a ghost. He was singing from the other side, from the end of life looking back, and the song was the bridge between us." Rick Rubin said later that Trent called him crying, thanking him for bringing the song to Johnny. Trent said, "You gave my song the ending I could never write." But there's more to this story. After Johnny's version became famous, after the video was played constantly, after critics called it one of the greatest covers ever recorded, Trent Reznor stopped performing Hurt live. For years, whenever Nine Inch Nails toured, Hurt was conspicuously absent from set lists. Fans would request it, scream for it, but Trent wouldn't play it. In a 2005 interview, he was asked why, and Trent said, "Because every time I think about performing it, I see Johnny, I hear his version, and I can't compete with that. How do I sing about pain when Johnny showed me what real pain looks like? How do I sing about mortality when Johnny was actually dying? I can't do it. It feels disrespectful somehow, like I'd be pretending to feel something Johnny actually felt." It wasn't until
It wasn't until 2013, 10 years after Johnny's death, that Trent began occasionally including Hurt in Nine Inch Nails sets again. And even then, he couldn't sing it the same way. He changed the arrangement, made it more ambient, more distant, like he was singing about a memory of a song rather than the song itself. In a 2013 interview, Trent said, "Johnny's version taught me something about my own song that I didn't know, which is that it's about time, about how the same words mean different things at different ages. At 29, I was singing about the immediate pain of addiction and self-destruction. At 70, Johnny was singing about the accumulated pain of a lifetime. And both versions are true. Both versions are hurt. But his version has weight mine couldn't have, because he'd lived 70 years and I'd only lived 29. Johnny Cash died on September 12, 2003, exactly 4 months after June, just like he'd predicted. His last music video was Hurt. The last image the world has of Johnny Cash is him sitting at a piano in a decaying museum, surrounded by ghosts and closing the lid. That image, that song, became his eulogy. At Johnny's funeral, Rick Rubin played Hurt, not Trent's version, but Johnny's, and people who'd known Johnny for decades said it was the most appropriate goodbye possible, because Johnny had hurt himself his whole life, literally with drugs, metaphorically with choices, and in the end, he'd hurt everyone who loved him by leaving. Just like the song said, "Everyone I know goes away in the end." Trent Reznor didn't attend the funeral. He wasn't close to Johnny personally, they'd never met, but he sent flowers with a card that read, "Thank you for showing me what my song was really about." Years later, in 2020, Trent Reznor won an Oscar for his film scoring work, and in his acceptance speech, he mentioned Johnny Cash. He said, "When I was young, I wrote angry songs about pain, and then Johnny Cash took one of those songs and showed me what pain really looks like. He taught me that songs don't belong to the people who write them, they belong to the people who need them. And sometimes the person who needs your song most is someone you'll never meet, someone from a different world, a different generation, a different world. But the song bridges that gap, and that's the magic of music." The Hurt video has been viewed hundreds of millions of times. It's consistently ranked as one of the greatest music videos ever made, not because of its technical brilliance, though it's beautifully shot, but because of its raw honesty. Because you're watching a man die on camera. You're watching him say goodbye, and he's using someone else's words to do it, which somehow makes it more powerful because those words were written by a 29-year-old who was also dying, just slower, just differently. Trent Reznor is now 59 years old, older than Johnny Cash was when he made his version of Hurt. And in recent interviews, Trent has said, "I understand the song now. I'm closer to Johnny's age than to the age I was when I wrote it, and I feel the weight he was singing about, the regret, the awareness that time is running out, the knowledge that everyone you love will eventually go away. And when I listen to Johnny's version now, it hits even harder because I'm living it too, just like he was." There's a recording that exists. It's in the Nine Inch Nails archives from 2003, shortly after Johnny died. Trent recorded himself playing Hurt on piano, alone in his studio. No band, no production, just him and the piano, similar to how Johnny recorded it. And at the end of the recording, you can hear Trent crying, just soft crying, and then he says to himself,
"Thank you, John. I finally understand." That recording has never been released, probably never will be, but people who've heard it say it's devastating, more emotional than either the Nine Inch Nails version or Johnny's version, because it's the sound of one artist mourning another, mourning the loss, but also honoring the transformation. Mark Romanesque, the video director, said in a 2015 interview, "I've made videos for everyone, Madonna, Jay-Z, Beyoncé, but the Johnny Cash Hurt video is the one I'll be remembered for, and I'm okay with that, because it's the one that mattered most. It wasn't about selling records or looking cool. It was about documenting a man's final statement, his final goodbye, and the fact that he chose to say goodbye using someone else's words, a younger man's words about pain and self-destruction, shows that pain is universal, that hurt doesn't have an age. We all try to feel, trying to cope, trying to survive, and sometimes the best way to say goodbye is to admit you hurt yourself, you hurt others, and you're sorry, but it's too late to fix it. And that's what Johnny Cash's hurt is. It's an apology, a confession, and a surrender, all in 4 minutes. Rick Rubin was asked in 2018 what he thinks Johnny would say about the impact of hurt, and Rick said, "Johnny knew it was special. When we finished recording it, he said to me, 'This is my goodbye, Rick. This is how I want to be remembered, not as the man in black, not as the outlaw, but as a man who hurt, who failed, who regretted, and who's honest about it.'" And I think Trent's reaction, saying the song wasn't his anymore, would have meant everything to Johnny, because it meant he'd succeeded. He'd taken a young man's pain and made it universal, made it timeless, and that's what great artists do. They take personal pain and make it communal. They make you feel less alone in your hurt. Today, Hurt by Johnny Cash is considered one of the greatest cover songs ever recorded. It's played at funerals, at memorials, it's used in films and TV shows. It's become the definitive version, despite Trent Reznor being the writer. And Trent is okay with that. More than okay. He's honored by it. Because Johnny Cash took his song and completed it. Showed him what it was really about. Taught him that songs grow up just like people do. They mean different things at different ages. And sometimes the person who sings your song at 70 understands it better than you did at 29. Not because they're smarter, but because they've lived longer, hurt more, lost more, and survived more. And that survival, that accumulated weight of a lifetime, that's what makes Johnny's hurt so powerful. It's not just a cover, it's a document of a man's final reckoning with himself, with his life, with his regrets, and with the love for a woman who went away and left him behind to face the end alone. When Johnny sings "I Will Make You Hurt," he's singing to us, the listeners, telling us that his death will hurt us, and he's right, it does. 20 years later, it still does, because that video, that performance, is so raw, so honest, so devastating that you can't watch it without feeling something break inside you. And maybe that's what Trent meant when he said, "That song isn't mine anymore." Maybe he meant that Johnny had taken his words about wanting to feel pain and turned them into words that actually make you feel pain. Not the pain of addiction or self-destruction, but the pain of being human, of losing people you love, of running out of time, of becoming someone you don't recognize, of looking back at your empire of dirt and realizing it was all meaningless without love. And that's the final lesson of Johnny Cash's hurt. That hurt is universal, that we all carry it, that we all inflict it, and in the end, the only thing that matters is whether we loved and were loved. And Johnny Cash loved June Carter so much that when she went away, he followed, because living without her was a hurt he couldn't bear. And he sang about that hurt using Trent Reznor's words, and those words became his epitaph. "Everyone I know goes away in the end. Yes, Johnny, yes, they do. And you went away too, but you left us this song, this video, this moment of pure honesty. And that's more than an empire of dirt. That's immortality."